Hello, and welcome to The Executive Appeal, a show that convenes the world's most powerful and successful leaders to share mentoring and career advancement advice to help you successfully transition into senior level executive positions. I'm your host, Alex Tremble, award-winning speaker, author, and leadership expert with over a decade of experience coaching and advising some of our nation's most senior level government leaders. So, if you're ready to reach your goals, let's get started. Hey, welcome, you beautiful, ambitious leaders to another power-packed episode of The Executive Appeal. I am your host, Alex Tremble, and I am thrilled to have you join us today. This podcast is where we go beyond the ordinary, moving past the cliches of just work hard to reach your goals. You know, we all know that's not real. To actually uncover the true secrets of success at the executive level. And by the way, if you didn't know so, I am not only today your host of this amazing podcast, I am an international prolific keynote speaker and executive coach. So if you are seeking an engaging and motivational speaker for your next event, look no further. I've had the privilege of addressing audiences around the world, sharing insights that go beyond the surface and leaving a long-lasting impact. Whether it's developing meaningful relationships with your team members, your mentors, clients, fellow executives, or is this focusing on providing your audience with the strategies required to achieve exceptional success and results in the face of life's challenges, I've got you covered. So don't miss out on your opportunity today to elevate your team and stakeholders' potential. Visit alextremble.com to book me today to speak your next opportunity, and let's make your next event unforgettable together. Now, with no further ado, let me say, today is a good day. See, today we have with always the cool, the artistic, the sly, the slick, the magnificent, super smart, super awesome Miss Trish Vassar. Trish currently serves as the Vice President for Global Learning and Development at the Coca Cola Company. And prior to serving in this role, Trish served as the Global Director for Learning, Leadership, and Development. And she served as the Chief Learning Officer for Cigna and the Vice President for Organizational Leadership Development at Express Scripts. And she's just a boss, period. So Trish is a creative and collaborative strategic problem solver who designs and operationalizes fully integrated talent management systems and solutions to enable current and future business strategies. And in addition to all of this magnificent awesomeness, she is also, like myself, an industrial organizational psychology, and that's how we know she's cool. How are you doing today, madam?
I'm wonderful. Thank you. How are you?
I am cool. Again, just being in the presence and the awe of such a wonderful leader who is an IO psychologist, which means you and we just, we all know IO psychologists are the coolest.
Naturally.
So, this is a question I've been looking forward to talking to you about. I get to work with a lot of leaders, and I think there's always something unique between a leader, an executive leader who is doing some really wonderful, phenomenal things here in the United States, and it's just really cool. And I feel like there's a difference at some level for those leaders who serve globally. So I'd love to just start the conversation off with what is the most fun aspect of leading a global effort as you do?
Thank you for that question. I think it's a really good one. I have been fortunate to work on at roles that are primarily U.S. focused or North American focused, and I have worked in roles that are global in nature. And I do, as you've noted, gravitate towards the global roles. Precisely because I think it's so fun and gratifying to learn about how the solutions you architect apply in different cultures or don't apply in some cases. I really enjoy the aspect of learning cultural nuances, and especially, in a role that gets you to to think about the entire globe. I think especially being situated in North America, physically,
Mhm.
geographically, sometimes we just get used to the idea of thinking in our own cultural patterns,
Mhm.
and getting to work with people all around the world sort of forces you to break those patterns, and I really like that.
I love that for so many different reasons. So, I mean, you and I know one of our mutual friends, Sue Lamb, who's also been a guest on the podcast. She's always popping somewhere in the world, and as you said, I believe that, as you said, it's really easy to become U.S. centric in your mind when you're always here, and
Mhm.
a great value of going out into the world. Again, you can learn a lot via reading and books and videos and things like that. But I always feel like whenever I leave the country to speak or coach whatever I'm doing or train, it's it's that immersion, right? Like you're forced to be in it all the time, and you just learn through almost osmosis.
Mhm. It is. It's so true. And as a matter of fact, our mutual friend Sue is in Cape Town this week. So, I mean, she's all around the world. And I have found such luck in the grace of people who are willing in the company, outside the company, to help you learn, help me learn the culture and the sort of background context of how they work and what they work and what's important to them, and how even to perceive time. Time is perceived differently in different ways around the world. So I've just found people are incredibly gracious about helping people learn about their cultural and their culture and the nuances there. Especially if you go with a willing heart and a willing spirit, I think people are just really, really gracious about that.
Well, it's actually so funny when we talk about the differences and the potential blind spots. I always tell people, like, you can't solve a blind spot on yourself by yourself, because by definition you're blind to it. You can't see it, so you need others to point these things out for you. So you said time. Everyone think, oh, time is time. Well, no, time is not time.
Mhm.
Time can mean a
No, it
lot
is
of different
not.
things. And so, for those leaders, again, this podcast is focused on those individuals who are either already in the executive ranks or pushing to become an executive. What would you recommend they do to position themselves for a global position?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a few things. I think you have to have an open mind for
Mm,
one, and you can't, I think, approach things as though your solution is the only one. I think you have to think about like the nuances, as I mentioned before. I also am a fan. I have a friend who is a diversity and equity and inclusion practitioner who always reminds me about cultural informants, and helps
mm,
me think about like under, understanding an application through somebody else's lens. Like I have a friend in Peru, for example. I have a
mm,
friend in Japan, for example. Making contact with those folks and really understanding what work. It doesn't have to be specific to the project you want to lead or that you are leading today, but to understand the variety of ways that people perceive the things that you're talking about
mhm.
helps you build that muscle of being able to flex when and where you need to.
How do you decide when to get on a plane
Mm,
or to have a
that's a
Zoom
great
meeting?
question. It's a great question. I love the in-person aspect of my job because I love travel. So, if it's me, you can just say, "Oh, I think we ought to," and I'll be on the plane. I'll be no shame. But I understand the realities of doing that is not always, that's not always the best solution. So, I try to put in regular predictable checkpoints with people that will
Mm,
occur in person, so that they have some knowledge of me as a person and how I work, etc. And then I try to do whatever I can via Teams or whatever in between. But there are some problems that you just develop this sense of, this is not going anywhere. We really need to see eye to eye, like physically really see eye to eye,
yeah.
or a group of us needs to get together and work out some particularly hard problem. And you just sort of develop a sense now. So, even I, who will jump on a plane if you just look at me wrong, do understand the realities of budgets and things like that. So, but those predictable checkpoints that
Yeah.
you're going to get together in person, I find like makes people relax into the relationship a lot more
Mm,
easily.
yeah. Well, how can you? I'd love to know, like, how did you? Oh, this is okay. So let me ask you a question. So, okay,
Okay.
I was asked the other day. The person was talking to me. They say, Alex, I'm not sure what my next step is. They've
Mm,
made some really, really big gains in their career. Um, and they said, I've been just for the last couple of years, I'm really trying to figure out what my next step should be. Um, how do I know what my next step is? And so I'd love to ask you, I have a thought on it, but I'd love to ask you, what would you say to someone, or have you ever been in a situation where you didn't know what the next step should be, and what did you do?
yeah. Yeah, it's a great question, and one that I actually have sort of a trite answer to, but I'll give you that at the end. My first response is, of course, I've been in a situation where I didn't know where I wanted to go or what I wanted to do exactly next. And I have made the wrong decision once, and I have made the right decision a few times. And what I would say is, I think people have to be really specific and intentional and thoughtful about what they want out of their sort of end game. So, if you want to be, I don't know, the chief financial officer, you will be able to tell that there's these two options, let's say, that you have in front of you. One of you may take you closer faster than the other one may take you, some other direction. So directionally, I think you have to have an idea of where you want to go, and whether the next step that's in front of you will actually take you towards that or away from that. So that's like one answer. The second answer is, my best decisions have been the ones that scared me the most. My
Mm,
best career decisions have been the ones that I thought, woo, I don't know if I can do this, or I don't know, if it might have been a lateral move that
yeah.
felt like, you're supposed to
Hmm.
want to advance, 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 advance.
Hmm.
Sometimes those lateral moves get you there faster. And I think that's really an interesting concept that people sometimes are uncomfortable taking.
Yeah.
But really, the answer is, if it scares me, my gut tells me it's the right thing, because it's at least going to challenge me.
You have such perfect answers. So I love your answers. So I'll address your second one first. Um,
Hmm.
fear, if it scares you, that's a fear, right? This fear scares, and the thing about fear is that we're not afraid of things that we're sure we're going to be successful at. We're not afraid of things that we've done many times. We're not afraid of those things that are quote unquote simple to us. And so
Hmm.
by definition, when you put yourself in those situations where you're a bit nervous, you're saying there is a skill, there's something I don't know that I could learn from this situation
Exactly.
versus going for the thing that feels easy and the sure thing.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. There's no
so
challenge in a sure thing.
I love it. I love it. And if, like I said, it forces you to grow because you're already saying I don't know something already.
Mhm.
Um, and then your second one, the first one you said, I love that answer too. And it's actually funny because I was talking about the other day, like, how do I define a good decision versus a bad decision? And I tell people, the difference between a good decision and a bad decision, I believe, my personal belief, is that a good decision takes you closer to your goal. A bad decision takes you further away from your goal.
Exactly.
And that means that those decisions are subjective, right? Like something that could be really great for me could be not great for you, Trish, and something that's really great for you could not be great
Right.
because it's dependent on that person. And to that point, the only way you know whether you're getting closer or further away from your goal is to know what your goal is to spend that time, like you said, kind of trying to be clear about, where is it that you want to be? Do you want to be the CFO? Do you want to be this? Do you want to be that? And it's okay that at some point that may change, right?
Of
That
course.
endpoint may change, and then you'll redirect your new decisions towards the new one. But so I just love everything you were sharing.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I think people, well, I don't know, this might be an artifact of when I came into the business world too, but I think that people sometimes, I still encounter people that want to have career discussions with me or, just want to get my input on what they should do next or whatever. And um, they come to me and say, well, what do you think? What do you think I should do? I have no clue. I mean, I know what you're good at. I know what I think you could be great at, but I have no idea what you want unless you articulate it to me.
Yeah.
Then by articulating it to me, maybe I can be on the lookout. Maybe I can be the sponsor. Maybe I can help you get there. But there are a lot of people, and I would caution against this when you go talk to a leader in your organization or a mentor outside your organization, whatever the case may be, to say, to not have an opinion about your own destination
Mhm.
is not a good approach.
I I I yes. Yes to everything. Um, it's almost in the same vein as, again, I was coaching an individual the other day, and they said, "Well, I'm not sure if I'm having some issues with my staff. I just got hired into this role, having some issues with staff. I think they're trying to intentionally undermine me, and I'm thinking maybe I should go to my supervisor and tell them about it." And I said, look, I'm not telling you not to do it because everyone has to make their own decision. But I've always learned it's better to go to your supervisor with a solution versus a
For
problem.
sure.
So
For
if you're going to
sure.
go to them, like you need to have a solution. They
Mhm.
may they may give you some advice a different way, right? But
Yeah,
don't just go with a problem. So that's what it sounds like you're talking about. It's like if even if Miss Trish is going to share some ideas with you, but you should go at least have taken the time to think about what could be a direction. Um,
yeah,
and then you also talked about, which again I love, is ultimately at the end of the day you got to take action. If you're just sitting in a holding pattern for 2 years, 3 years, trying to figure out what you believe that next step is, you're not doing yourself any favors because you're not. I believe by trying something, by taking a step further, you're going to learn. You're going to say, I like this, or I don't like that, or I met that person, they shared this. Like, you got to be moving. You got to be acting versus sitting and waiting and hoping the answer is going to come to you.
for sure. I will say that I have found in a couple of different at a couple of different times in my life um, that I needed to hit pause, like
Mm,
not opt out of the career, the business world or whatever, but just because things happen in your life and you have to like stay where you are. And even as ambitious as I am, I
mhm.
had to say, okay, look, I'm not going to like run on the treadmill at 8 miles an hour for the next hour, for the next year of my life. I need to, whatever it is,
Yep.
take time to tend to my family, or
Yep.
maybe I'm in a geographical move, or maybe I just feel like I have a lot to learn in my current role. But again, I would say like articulating that is
Mhm.
super important so
Mhm.
people understand why you're doing the things that you're doing and why you're not doing the things you're not doing.
I always tell people there's this really cool research study. Actually, I won't get into it right now, but there's a really cool research study that brings home the point that if you're just willing to tell someone a reason,
Mhm, mhm.
it doesn't have to be a great reason, but a reason,
Yeah,
people will be much more understanding. Oh, okay, like, because I think it makes them think like you've thought through it, right? It's not
yeah,
just some random thing. You've thought through it, and there's a purpose for what you're doing. Um, and I was, so again, I was talking to another person I'm coaching, and she is planning. She's in the DEI world. She's a chief diversity officer,
Yeah.
and she's planning her next opportunity. And as we're thinking through this, I asked her, I'm like, so, have you decided, what gear do you want to be running? In your
Totally.
next job, do you want to be full on, like, I'm going to go into organization, I'm going to have to fight the battles and then win the wars in order to integrate this, or do you need a little slower pace right now because you've been
Mhm.
fighting for a while? You just need to recharge. And she was like, oh shoot, I hadn't thought about that. No, I need to recharge. Like, this last job was rough, and it,
Yeah.
it made me think. I thought about that because someone that I'm sure, Trish, I'm sure you know this person, this in the world you work in. They had worked in an organization where they were fighting tooth and nail to integrate these programs and initiatives. And they told me before they moved to their next opportunity, they were like, no, I can't do that again right now. I
Mm.
need to go in an organization that already believes in these values, is already supportive, and I just need to breathe right now. And that's okay.
Totally okay. Yeah, I mean, life is the reality, and especially, post-pandemic world. I think when the pandemic occurred, we were all brought into sharp relief what's really important to us, because we had to, and because, of the sort of grim reality of the early days of COVID. I mean, I think that, but and I think, maybe this is, optimistic of me, but I also want to think that organizations are much more open to hearing those kinds of things now than they were pre-pandemic. So I'm hopeful that, even though the catalyst for the eye opening was, not that great, that we at least have some more like openness, organizational interest in the employee as a whole person. And
Yeah.
so, of course, it's okay to opt out. I mean, every choice has consequences, but, it's certainly okay to say, look, this is not the time in my life when I can take advantage of this opportunity or make this geographical move or whatever.
Hmm. Hmm. It's funny. I want to throw another question at you before we start
Yeah.
wrapping up relatively soon. But I tell people, and I say this tongue in cheek. I used to work in the federal government, and I was in the Fed when the big shutdown happened. It lasted like 32 days, something like that. And I remember, I tell people that shutdown ruined me,
Mhm.
because like, I'd always been a workaholic. I loved producing. I loved work. I worked the weekends. I worked during holidays. Like, I always loved getting things done. And I remember, like, 2 days, 3 days into the shutdown, I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to drive myself crazy. There's nothing to do. I can't move. And literally, if the government shutdown, it's illegal for you to do any work. Like, you seriously cannot
Mhm.
work.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, and then about 5 days into the shutdown, I was like, oh, oh, I have a life. I can go for a walk. My wife and I went to the doctor's office. Like, we started doing things, and I was like, oh, I can have a life, and this is good. And I tell people, like, again, it's tongue in cheek, it ruined me, but when I went back to work, I still outperformed, still had, great ratings, all those things, but I didn't kill myself all the time because I understood that having that, again, I don't like the word work-life balance. I don't like that phrase, having, but being intentional about spending time on my own and with my family was a good thing for, I think, everyone.
Totally agree. Totally agree. I'm glad you had such a good experience. I know people who found out after, the work shutdown happened or during the work shutdown that they didn't know what they like to do.
Mm,
You can get so, your identity so focused in one thing, whether it's a relationship or a work relationship or a workplace or whatever, that
yeah.
you kind of forget yourself for a while. So
Mhm,
I don't like work-life balance either. I like work-life integration.
mhm,
Sometimes I'm working when I'm not quote unquote supposed to be, and
mm,
sometimes I'm not working when I quote unquote am supposed to be. But
yeah.
it all evens out. So
So oh gosh, you made that point. I gotta make one last point. Okay.
okay.
So I was thinking about that. that time off piece, that time for yourself. And so as a business owner, you learn very quickly it's very easy to work a lot,
Mhm.
because there are no parameters. Like you eat what you bring in, right? Um, and so I read this really great book like last year, and it really brought home the importance of, as a manager, you have to spend time for yourself or you're going to burn yourself out. And again, you already know this stuff, but it was like a reminder. And one of the points they make, and again, this is a funny point, but when are the when are the most when are you most effective, um, or most best for your time management when you're working? It's generally right before you go on vacation, because you know there's only so much time left. You prioritize, you get things done, and then you go. And so what they talked about is being intentional with your own life, and building in those times where you're not going to work, so that you are forced to be more intentional and more proactive, and prioritize better to get things done. So like literally every single the first week of every quarter, I take off. I take a week off, just me and my wife, or me and my wife, my little boy now. When we took off the month of October, we're heading over to Italy, probably do some a little more, few trips. Yes, I'm looking forward to it.
Amazing.
And the point is, because we're gonna work hard throughout the year, period. But we also need that other time,
Sure.
and it's very valuable for us.
I love that word intention.
Mm.
Yeah, that's a great word.
Well, so I had to ask you this question because you're evidently a rock star. So so Coca Cola Company has
Mhm.
been recognized by the American Opportunity Index as the
Mhm.
top ranking company for employee career growth in 2023. Um, Coca Cola has also been identified by both Time and Statistas as one of the best companies for future leaders. Um, how? Like, what did you do to make this happen?
Well, I mean, Coca Cola is a pretty magical place, just generally speaking. So, I mean, I have to say, I always tell people it's the best professional decision I ever made, and that is absolutely the truth. I think one thing that is super important for us at Coca Cola is this employability promise, which is, we're going to help you make the best career that you can imagine. Sometimes that'll be inside the Coca Cola system, and sometimes it won't be. But we are committed to helping people realize their career dreams. And I think that permeates a lot of things. It permeates how we hire, it permeates how we reward, it permeates how we develop our talent and our leadership development processes, our people practices. It permeates everything. And so I think, when you fundamentally want to make people's lives really fulfilling, it just shows. And it comes out in, awards like that America Opportunity Index, which was not something that you apply for, or we applied for. It just, was one
Yeah.
of those just blessings.
Well, but how do you? So one, I 100% believe in that concept. I'm always pushing with all the organizations I work with. I'm always telling them, hey, look, you want to that you want to prepare your staff and develop your staff and your leaders to be the best they possibly can.
Mhm.
Um, and here's the reality: if you create phenomenal leaders, there's going to be competition for them. They
Mhm.
may leave, um, and if they do leave, hopefully you've created a brand that other people say, oh wow, like I need to go there. Like, I just everyone who goes seems to love it. They appreciate it. Even when they do leave, they talk great about it, and like that makes sense. But how do you convince how do you convince people to not be afraid of losing the good talent, right? Sometimes leaders
Yeah, that's a
don't
great
want to develop their
question.
staff but then they'll leave, and they're essential. And I'm throwing one last piece. How do you differentiate between when you're talking about retention rates, right? Sometimes people are leaving, but it's for a good reason. And how do you know the
Yeah.
difference?
Sure. I mean, you fundamentally have to shift the mindset. I think that, a lot of places that I've worked for, there's this concept of talent hoarding, which is kind of what you're talking about. Like once
Mhm.
you get somebody great, you just put your arms around them and you love them and you want to keep them because they're fantastic. And ultimately, I think you have to change the mindset to think more about what's good for the person, and what's good for the person or the employee is will be good for the organization as well. And there are always going to be leaders who say, gosh, I can't let go of this person. Well, honestly, if that person is going to leave, either they're going to leave and stay with the company, which you hope, or
Mhm.
they're going to leave and go somewhere else, which you don't want to have happen for somebody who's super talented. So I mean, it's really a mindset shift, and you have to be, to use your word, you have to be intentional about it, and you have to never waver. Like the second somebody gets
Yeah.
a signal that you're not out for their best interest, you're done. It's over.
Wow. I love it, that commitment and that consistency. Um, so I'm going to open the floor for you in just a second, but we've kind of
Okay.
gotten into the habit of asking a particular question. I didn't pose this to you before, so you don't. It's come out of left field. You just do the
Okay.
best you can.
Okay, I'll do the
Um,
best I can.
so what I've found from a lot of the people I coach are high net worth leaders, people who are doing very well in those senior executive level positions. And what I am seeing is a lot of them are having challenges with raising kids. Um,
Hmm.
the vast majority of them do not come from money. They didn't even come
Okay.
from means. They had to work, they had to struggle, they had to figure out how to get to where they got to. And now they're trying to balance, how hard to make it for their kids, or, what to
Hmm.
do versus let them
Great
do.
question.
Do you have any thoughts or ideas on this?
Man, that is a $1 million question. I think that it is really, really hard. So I have a 17-year-old, almost 18. He's getting
Mhm.
ready to go to college next year. I have a 14-year-old who's almost 15. And certainly I am by no means a parenting expert, but what I will say is I have learned through a lot of trial and error. I don't, of course, want to make it harder than it has to be for my kids, but I want to leave them equipped to
Mhm.
deal with the world when I'm not there making every decision, but right beside them.
Yeah.
And so I have really, I mean, again, to use your word, become very intentional. My husband and I have become very, very intentional about deliberately pausing when we're at a moment of having to make a decision, like, do we bail him out, or do we make this easier for her?
Yeah.
And the question we really do ask ourselves is, by doing this, will I better or worsen their ability to
Mhm.
deal with this life event?
Yeah.
So, by eliminating all frustration on behalf of your kids, you leave them unequipped to deal with frustration, which they will inevitably experience.
Yeah.
So, as much as we possibly can, we make, and daily, I have to think, will by doing this, will I make it easier or harder for them to deal with this kind of situation in the future? And then you roll the dice. I don't know.
I I love it. I love it. Again, my little guy's only 7.5 months. And I'm already looking at him and being like, bruh, there are already things and places you've been that I did not get to
For
go.
sure. For sure. My God, I took my kids to Paris last year. I mean, I didn't get to go to Paris until I was 28 years old, but
I I'm last one put on the table. One thing I was thinking the other day, I think I was reading a book or I was doing something, and the thought came to my mind to ask myself, am I doing this for him or am I doing this for us?
ooh, that's a
Um,
good one. That's a good
yeah,
one.
like because my wife and I, we were started sleep training him, and
Yep.
are we picking him up because he needs it or something's wrong with him, or is it because we feel bad?
Yeah. 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 That's a really good one. That's a really good one.
Madam, I thank you so much. I want to open the floor and just is there any advice, thoughts, anything you'd like to share with our audience as we begin to wrap up?
Well, I mean, I'm going to borrow your word again. I think the intentionality behind your choices cannot be understated. So I think the world now is just geared towards, it's just wound in a way that makes us want to feel like we have to hurry into decisions or hurry up to find things. I mean, it's easy to get information quickly, it's easy to make decisions quickly, but I think like inserting the deliberate pause for helping yourself be more intentional about the choices you're making, I think that there's so much power in that.
I could not agree and concur more. Thank you so much, Ms. Trish, for
My pleasure.
everything you've shared today. Your stories, your advice, your thoughts, your ideas, your laughter, all of it. Thank you so much. For those of you who've been listening and watching, I'd love to hear from you. Like, what advice did Miss Trish share today that you were like, wow, like I hadn't thought about this. And this is something I should consider more. I'd love to hear from you again in the chat box. Go and throw it in there. And you know where I'm about to go with this. Don't just look back. Reach back. If you found anything of value from today's episode, please don't keep it to yourself. Don't say that person, this person, there, those people over there should have been here. They would have learned they're over here. Don't do that. Don't be that person. Don't look back, reach back. Bring the content to them. Bring them to the content. All you got to do is click share, click like, subscribe, leave a note. All of those things help the algorithm and push this message out to help more and more people. So without any further ado, I encourage you, as always, stay strong, stay positive, and definitely stay moving. See ya. Thanks for listening to The Executive Appeal with Alex Tremble. I invite you to follow The Executive Appeal wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow me, your host, Alex Tremble, across all socials or via email for exclusive webinars, courses, and speaking engagements on continued topics of executive leadership. So, until next time, stay strong, stay positive, and definitely stay moving.